All right, good morning and welcome to the show. This is a weekly jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we have a special episode here. As you can see our thumbnail, we're talking about neighborhood watch, right? Police, safety, and people. And Rohi, kind of get us started. What is it about neighborhood watch that keeps our community here in Madera especially safe?
Yeah, so it's kind of taking a citizen-led initiative to kind of understanding that even though we have law enforcement and other resources to our advantage, that they can't be everywhere. And as a neighborhood, if we can kind of be looking out for our neighbors, and especially if you really know your neighbor, you know the cars they drive, and if you see something suspicious, it's kind of being a little bit more proactive instead of just saying, well, hopefully, police will do something about it. So,
and just coincidentally, we happen to have. We had one yesterday, right? And
Yes,
you were part of that in your neighborhood.
yes.
And maybe you can touch on what the outcome was, right? Or
Yeah.
how many people showed up, why people showed up, and who was there? Who was
Yeah.
part of this neighborhood watch meeting?
And that's good to kind of understand if you're out there and you're thinking about why would I want neighborhood watch, or how does that kind of go about. I've attended a few of these now throughout the city and in a lot of different neighborhoods, and two things come to be very apparent: that there are some citywide similarities. So a lot of these neighborhood watches have similar concerns, but outside of that, you do get into a section where you start identifying very specific needs for your block or a couple of blocks of area that's part of that neighborhood watch. And it allows for this communication between your group, your neighborhood group, and then also law enforcement to kind of address those issues. So it can be heard, it can be addressed. So going to a lot of those, our neighborhood, even though we are in a gated community, and to some degree we feel like we're isolated from maybe some of the things that go on outside of our community, we're not immune to it. And I thought it would be just kind of a great idea to bring in the law enforcement in the city, because again, one of the things that we do well here at the city is we make it very easy. You ask for it, and you have a ton of staff and resources that will go into making these come together. So I will say that very good kudos to that group that made it very seamless and easy to kind of come together. But again, it was just it kind of also came out of people just having certain concerns in our community, and instead of kind of addressing it one off and being like, okay, let's tell you this, and then trying to make newsletters, it's like these are a little bit more concerning, and they're also outside of just my control. It's now we need to get law enforcement, now we need to get some other people here to give their opinions on the matter. And that's kind of what formulated that neighborhood watch last night.
Yeah, good. And attending these throughout the city, especially when it's your district or not district, you get to see some of the concerns in certain areas of our city, right?
Yeah.
Certain areas may have other needs. Maybe we need more policing. Others, hey, we don't have enough green space, or hey, traffic. Traffic becomes a big issue there.
Yes.
It's typically surround safety, right? And just to give you some context and some history, it looks like in the 60s and 70s, the rise in crime nationwide, communities began to really informally have these watch groups. And in 1972, the National Sheriff's Association formalized the Neighborhood Watch Program. And if any of you guys grew up in the era where I did, in the early 80s and what have you, then you would remember seeing these signs, and I'll bring it up here in a minute. And those signs had, they had the circle with the cross across it with what seemed to be a burglar, right?
Yeah.
Always keeping an eye
Yeah.
out for anything, maybe people, theft and what have you, right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
with that, it gave people, or these folks that were thinking of creating a crime or some type of burglary, it gave them, hey, here, heads up, the burglary obviously reduced, strengthened police community partnerships, and it empowered residents to take ownership of their block, right? That's kind of what we try to encourage in these neighborhood watch parties, is we try to make sure that people are empowered, getting to know who their neighbors are, looking after one another. And truthfully, you see that, you still see some of those people that have that community pride.
Yeah.
And I think in your case, I mean, here you are with a enclosed HOA, but nevertheless, people are very like-minded in what they want to see,
Correct.
especially around their community. Can you touch on that, on what were some of the values, or what were some of the concerns that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, again, even though we're a private community, one of the topics, the hot ones, was speed. Obviously our speed limits are a little lower in our private roads, but speed still being a concern. And again, it's understanding that even though in our particular case, for instance, like law enforcement can't do radar, they can't give tickets in that kind of regard. There are still creative solutions that they can do to kind of help with that. So instead of feeling helpless and like, oh, there's no real solution, there was a lot of good talk that came about solutions that we could implement, and also with law enforcement's help to encourage those that are speeding to slow down. So that, I think, was you're talking about years of complaints about speeding, and here comes some simple solutions that is kind of like makes people feel at ease. And the other one is still suspicious activity. I mean, again, being a private community, we're not immune to theft or people scoping out the place. We've had robberies and burglars and stuff in there. So it's, again, letting people know that this is happening. This is the awareness part, right? This is happening. And if you see it, to say something about it. And that was kind of really for us, that missing key part is people would see it. I tell people all the time, hey, we had some guy walking around last night. Oh, I saw that guy. Why didn't you call about it? Oh, I didn't think to bother you, or I didn't think to bother this, or it's like, no. Like, so those were kind of, again, the core for our community of what I was really pushing for, is to kind of let people know, like, no, say something. And also the city, gave us a lot of resources that are available at the city level to reporting that as well.
So at these neighborhood watch parties, and I've been
Parties. I love that you call it a party. It was a party. Yeah.
Well, these neighborhood
That's what we
watch
need.
events or meetings. Let's break it down as far
Sure.
as who was there and why is it important for people to know that, hey, your city rep, aside from your city electeds or supervisors
Yeah.
for that area, who else is there to provide resources and information?
Yeah. So for, most of the events, you're going to get, obviously, your local law enforcement. You're going to get your, usually your local fire. And then, so depending on the district, I was wearing two hats. I was there for the association president and representing District 1 for our association. And then the mayor was there last night. So typically that's kind of, what you would usually get is your local representative at the district level. I know Supervisor Poitras attended one of them that happened to be in his district, and so again, it's putting a name to a face. It's letting you know if you do have concerns, maybe outside of this neighborhood watch, here's the person, here's the guy or girl that you can reach out to. So again, it's a lot of making those connections, and that's really if I had to pull a word out of the whole thing, it's about connections. Connection to my neighbors, connection to my officials.
And getting to know who represents your area. You'd be surprised how many people don't know they're elected, right? And by continuously attending these, I think people get familiar with the faces and know, hey, if I have a problem, I have a contact to where I can reach out to, not only
Correct.
to either police, but I also can go directly to my city elected, if there's a city matter, or if it's a county, then you have that county deal.
Yeah.
I've seen probation out there a couple of times. Our code enforcement, Christina Herrera, does a great job of putting these together.
Yeah.
I know that during COVID, that kind of went away, and then it started slowly coming back. And I think people want to see these. So there's people that do step up to become their community leaders that want to host these events so that they can get to know not only their neighbors, but also know what resources are available for us. That there is an outlet whenever you need some assistance when it comes to public safety, whether it's parks or what have you, or any city service that's required, then know that you have these neighborhood watch meetings that'll help you. And they turn into much bigger things, right? Because overall, during, I believe, the summertime, you have these national night out. And typically it's those same areas where you meet for Neighborhood Watch that host these national night out. And it's good to go out there and revisit and have them know that the city is always it's always moving around and making sure that all of its constituents are having these safe neighborhood parties. Now, Rohi, from it, any concerns that really that stood out aside from your standard, hey, well, we have a lot of traffic going, but anything that you could say that you've seen, anything unusual that you would say in attending, not necessarily yesterday, but in general, any ones that stood out that you said, oh, okay, wow, I wasn't sure that this is an ongoing issue that was happening.
Yeah, and I think what you have is, because obviously you're out there with your neighbor, sometimes your next door neighbor, so there is a little bit of reluctance to kind of bring an issue, because it's very easy to kind of all of a sudden go oh, it's this guy who's the guy we're talking about, right? But I remember at one of the last ones, this is kind of, you can kind of see where this is going to be at a lot of them is, for instance, dog barking, and you would think again, looking at it, that's kind of it's a minor issue to some people, but if you live next door to a barking dog that's always going off like crazy, you really haven't got the response that you would want to get. It can be a bit frustrating. And I remember at this one particular meeting, the person brought up the topic, and all of a sudden the dog starts barking, and they're like, it's right there. Can we, how do we fix this? How do we address this? And again, it was nice to see, code enforcement was there at that time going through the process, and here's a reporting process, and here's what happens, here's the legalities, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, and a lot of that is, like you've done, I'm sure a lot longer than I have, is people want to feel heard, and they want to know what their options are, and a lot of times the steam builds up in a community when those things aren't happening, because it's like, I'm calling about this dog, and nothing's happening. Well, here's the realm that we can work within, and it doesn't maybe fully calm the situation, but it gives them relief to know, okay, now I understand, now I know what I have to do, and I can go forward with that. And the other one was related to cars, it's the non-op cars essentially that are in probably a lot of neighborhoods, and driveways, and obviously when it irks a person to the point to where they say, hey, what can we do about it? Just going through, again, the educational piece to kind of say, this is what qualifies, this is what we can do, we are doing this, and I know it was, Mayor had kind of touched on this, sometimes government runs slow, and you just have to unfortunately accept that it's not going to happen sometimes like you think, like that very second. It may take a bit of a process to get done. So
yeah, no, and I understand that. When it comes to safety, though, just know that we encourage, and I think there's a phrase that the chief and most of the officers say that when it comes to calling into the department, right?
Yeah.
And Roy, you know that phrase pretty well, because we hear it consistently when we go to these neighborhood watches.
No, tell me the phrase. I don't know the phrase.
Well, the phrase is, no call.
Yeah. Yes.
It's,
sorry.
I mean, you always want to call. There's no
Correct.
such thing as a no call. You want to call whenever you feel something is not good. And
Correct.
Dispatch is there to make sure and screen that call to make sure if it's something of safety, then obviously our police officers, code enforcement can get out there
Yeah.
and make sure that they address that. So even though government moves slow, maybe on certain projects, but when it comes to safety, know that we're always very proactive in that, making sure that we have that rapport and service to the community. One of the things that I hear our chief say, and most of the officers, is that it's the customer service that is very apparent here in our community, and I think that was established several decades back to try to make sure that we give our community a sense of, hey, your police is not someone that you want to be afraid of. If not,
Correct.
it's someone that you want to know that the presence of them makes your community a lot safer, and it does, and that's the way we look at it. So most of these officers, when they're out there, obviously on top of having to fight crime, they're also some of them are your residents, some of them are people that are very involved in their communities, and they want to make sure that they keep you safe. So again, no call.
No call too small.
Correct. No call is too small. Thank you. I appreciate that because that's exactly the phrase
Yeah.
that we try to reiterate as we go through these
Yeah.
neighborhood watch meetings.
Yeah.
I call them parties, right? But they're not parties.
It is a party. You're supposed to. It sounds more entertaining than a
Yeah.
meeting.
You know, and they're going to go through a process of like explaining certain things, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it is that you already have some of these things that happen online, right? We have, what is it, Neighbor Next Door?
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, stirs up some conversation because it could be a simple comment, meaning, hey, did someone leave their dog out? Here's a picture of a dog that's out there. This is a lost dog. Or, hey, are any of you guys noticing the traffic, the noise of these youngsters trying to race down Sunset or Howard, right?
Yeah.
And that makes people aware as well, right? But there's nothing like having a physical meeting to get to know who your neighbors are. And you'd be surprised. In my neighborhood, I probably know most of the people around my block. I'm on the court, right? Sunnydale and Heatherwood, and it is it's just a good feeling to know your neighbors. I know
Yeah.
whenever I get any excess fruit, then that's my first thing I do. That's kind of the way I look at saying, hey, how are you doing? This is who I am. But it was always encouraged by our code enforcement not to be the leader of that neighborhood watch. You'd have to hopefully find someone there, especially if you're the elected. It's because a lot more responsibility will lie on you. But if someone
Correct.
within your neighborhood is interested in establishing and hosting one of these, Rohi, what are some of the steps that they can take?
I mean, getting in contact with the city. I mean, again, there's a whole group that will help make the flyers, help get the awareness out, help organize. You know, get all the again the people of the party to get them together, and then it's really just your community's job just to show up and ask questions. You know, I mean, it's interesting because it's always, you know, there's the excitement. We're all there. We're sitting there, and all of a sudden, you know, after the few couple speeches, it's like, okay, what issues do you have? And like that first bit of pause of like, I wasn't ready for the questioning, you know. But then once it starts rolling, you can see like people understand that it's a safe environment. You can say what you need to say, and it turns into a good hour-long discussion of, you know, and again, sometimes we can't come to solutions for every problem, but I think the bulk of them, they get done. And that's why I would say if you don't have one yet, maybe start one. Maybe be that leader like you're talking about. And instead of waiting or complaining like, hey, why aren't we having those? Take a little bit of initiative and say, you know what, I'll stand up. It's not a terrible amount of work, but I'll stand up and be that representative for my area and formulate a neighborhood watch.
Yeah. You know, and here's a couple of things that I do want to point out, because when we're talking about neighborhood watch, we also want to talk about like what are some of the pros, but there's always the cons, right?
Sure.
What can happen with not having a neighborhood watch, right? Well, then people start looking at media, and media for some reason just it drives fear into people.
Yeah.
So then you don't want to really get out and into the community to know your neighbors, because media has already done a good job of kind of profiling. So
Yeah.
you have to balance the vigilance with fairness and avoiding profiling of people. And I think in Madera more specifically, we have diverse communities. And, you know, even though we use the technology, we have to build trust with our communities to be able to know who your neighbors are. You'd be
Correct.
surprised how many people may have a perception of what this community looks like or this block. But once they get to know their neighbors, you know, you'd be surprised how common their interests that they have are so common that, hey, I'm just here to make sure that I can raise my family, but at the same time make sure that I can look after my community. And a lot of folks don't really understand, because you can go down any other neighborhood and you can see like, oh my God, they have so much stuff, so much junk up in the front. I wonder if they know that this is probably not acceptable and it's against code.
Yeah.
So then code enforcement may have to go in there and culturally say, hey, you know what? These are part of code enforcement. You can't have these long weeds and stuff. There's weed abatement. There's certain things that you have to do. Cars, you can't really park these huge diesel freight trucks across your aisle because that's not allowed, right? So I think it's just a matter of education, information, so that people understand that it's not necessarily about burglaries and what have you, but also keeping your neighborhood, keeping it clean, keeping it very attractive, so that when values come into play, you're not seeing a depreciation in value on your deal, rather an appreciation equal to those other neighborhoods that do have these amenities, right?
Yeah.
And or, you know, the cleanliness, and that's very important. So I think having to know your neighbors and educating them, you know, so that they understand that, hey, a good neighborhood is a clean neighborhood, but also a neighborhood where all your community comes together to talk about these issues that potentially could become concerns. Because the last thing you want is you don't want flight.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have home ownership pride there, then, you know, all you have is a bunch of tenants, but a lot of them don't really care because it's not their property. So
Correct.
therefore,
Yeah.
ownership doesn't really take precedence over these issues that we face.
Yeah, and in your market, I mean, you're in the home lending and selling and all that. I mean, home value, you know, you could have the most pristine home, but if next door it's a garbage pit, you know, your home value, the person when you go to sell your house, that nobody's going to want to buy that house. So some of that, you know, may help with again, kind of addressing some of the riffraff that may be in your neighborhood to kind of, like you said, I mean. Some guy might be running a car repair shop out of his house, and you know it's just littered with broken down cars in his front yard, and not realizing like there are tools in place that you can actually get some help with that. You know,
And you'd be surprised how people can people can live in that type of environment where sometimes it's not conducive.
Yeah.
And because they live in that environment, they live in an environment where they're just constantly just living in that, like, man, I don't want to tell my neighbors this. What can I do to tell my neighbors, right? What can I do to tell my neighbors?
Yeah, I
and
got
that
you.
sometimes becomes a problem. So
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's the thing is you don't ever want to feel like you're the tattletale, but you know you need to you have to get things addressed. So like I said, I think the environment was a pretty safe environment in the sense of you know people felt they could speak, they could be heard, and I don't think you saw a lot of the reluctance to really say anything.
Yeah.
Come on in, no.
So, okay, so that says a lot there. And I think essentially what will happen is that we can see that more of these neighborhoods are going to be in a better hands when we have your police, code enforcement, and city staff kind of guiding you through the whole thing. But
Sure.
anyhow, we thought this would be a great way to give you guys a sense of what Neighborhood Watch is. We look forward to bringing more of these topics to you directly so that we can inform you what's taking place here in the city. But any last thoughts before we sign off here, Rohi?
No, again, I would just encourage those, if you're looking to get it done, contact the city, get it set up, and don't be shy, because again, it doesn't take a whole lot to get these in place, and I think it's definitely a huge improvement for your area.
Well, thank you again for sharing that experience, Rohi. I think we look forward to bringing more of this content to folks that are within our city. Again, this is our Neighborhood Watch. If you want to get involved, feel free to reach out to the city directly, the police. We do have our code enforcement director, Christina Herrera, that can help you with that. But nevertheless, you'll have an opportunity to be a community leader to start hosting one of these community watch meetings. So thank you again for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.